The meeting in Berlin had ended, but for Africa, the real storm was just beginning. Europe's empires would wait no longer. Whoever arrived first would claim the land. But Africa was still home to powerful kingdoms, and not all of them would surrender. The Zulu warriors, the Ashanti Kingdom, the Mahdist armies, and Ethiopia were preparing to fight for Africa's future. After the Berlin Conference, Europe wasted no time. Its empires began moving into different regions of Africa simultaneously. Britain expanded from north to south. France pushed inland from the west, while other European powers searched for their own share. But Africa was never an empty continent. Powerful kingdoms had stood here for centuries. And some of these kingdoms were determined to defend their lands. Africa's resistance was about to begin. In southern Africa, there stood a kingdom far stronger than Europe expected, the Kingdom of Zulu. Under King Cetshwayo, the Zulu army was renowned for its discipline and courage. They had no intention of surrendering their homeland. Every warrior was trained from childhood. The Zulu army was one of the most disciplined military forces in Africa. But very soon, this powerful kingdom would face the British Empire. January 22nd, 1879, the British Army had established a camp beneath Isandwana Mountain. Everything appeared calm. Beyond the horizon, thousands of Zulu warriors moved silently. The British had no idea what was approaching. The Zulu commanders used a battle formation that would become legendary. The Buffalo Horns formation was closing around the British camp. Within hours, one of the world's most powerful armies would suffer one of the greatest shocks in its history. By the end of the day, the British camp at Isandwana had fallen. The British Army had suffered a defeat it never expected. The news reaching London shocked the British Empire. No one had expected the Zulu army to achieve such a victory. This victory became one of Africa's greatest military successes against a European power. The Kingdom of Zululand had demonstrated its strength to the world. But the British Empire would not accept this defeat. A much larger army was already on its way to southern Africa. The defeat at Isandwana was unacceptable to the British Empire. London dispatched thousands of reinforcements to southern Africa. This time, British commanders would not repeat their mistakes. Every movement was carefully planned. Within months, the British Army advanced once again. Their objective was the heart of the Zulu Kingdom. King Cetshwayo knew the final battle was approaching. At Ulundi, the fate of the Zulu Kingdom would be decided. July 4th, 1879. The two armies met for one final battle on the plains of Ulundi. The Zulu warriors advanced once again with extraordinary courage, but this time they faced an army fully prepared for battle. Britain's new tactics and superior firepower changed the course of the battle. After Ulundi, the Zulu Kingdom lost its independence, but its resistance became one of the enduring symbols of African history. As the Zulu Kingdom fell, a new resistance was rising. In northeastern Africa, Sudan was beginning to rise. Muhammad Ahmad declared himself to be the Mahdi. Within a short time, thousands rallied to his cause, joined the movement one after another. A massive uprising had begun against Egyptian and British authority. The objective was clear: Khartoum, and one of the most important sieges in African history. Farsai, Lanmatinin, 1884, the Mahdist forces laid siege to Khartoum. The city's defense was led by General Charles Gordon. He waited for reinforcements, but time was running out. After months of siege, the city became completely isolated. Khartoum was cut off from the outside world. In early 1885, Khartoum fell. The victory echoed across the world, as much of Africa fell under colonial rule. One nation remained independent: Ethiopia. Emperor Menelik Adwa recognized the coming danger from across the country. Tens of thousands of warriors answered his call. Italy believed Ethiopia would fall like many other African states. It was a grave miscalculation. In 1896, near the town of Adwa, one of the most important battles in African history was about to begin. March 1st, 1896, in the mountains of Adwa, two armies met in a battle that would change history. Emperor Menelik Adwa advanced with an army gathered from every corner of Ethiopia. The nation was determined to defend its independence. Italian commanders expected an easy victory, but Ethiopia's mountains would become their greatest challenge. By the end of the day, victory belonged to Ethiopia. Adwa became a symbol of Africa's fight for freedom. The victory at Adwa became more than Ethiopia's triumph. It became a symbol of hope for all of Africa. The news quickly spread across Europe. The world was talking about an African nation defeating a European army. By 1914, almost all of Africa had come under European control. The greatest exception was Ethiopia. The colonization of Africa changed the map forever, but the struggle for freedom never truly ended. While wars continued across Africa, in the Congo, a quieter, yet far more ruthless system was taking shape. Every village was required to collect fixed rubber quotas, month after month. Those quotas kept increasing. People spent most of their days deep in the forest, fields were abandoned, and village life began to change. Rubber from the Congo was fueling Europe's growing industries, but the price was paid by the people of the Congo. As rubber quotas increased, village life began to collapse. People no longer worked for their own fields, but for the demands of the colonial system. Fields were left empty, food became scarce, hunger and disease began spreading through many parts of the Congo. This was not only economic exploitation, the daily life of a society, its families, its security, and its future were being torn apart. English, in Europe, rubber symbolized the modern world, but in the Congo, that same rubber became a symbol of unimaginable suffering for millions. Britain's ambition was far greater than acquiring new territory. Cecil Rhodes dreamed of an empire stretching from Cape Town to Cairo. The project became known as Cape to Cairo. Its goal was an unbroken British corridor across Africa. Railways, telegraph lines, and new colonial outposts would become the foundation of this grand vision. But standing in the way was another European power, France. The two empires were about to confront each other in the heart of Africa. In 1898, a small town in Africa, captured the world's attention. Its name was Fashoda. On one side stood the British Army, on the other, the French expedition. Two great empires claimed the same land. Across Europe, war seemed possible. A single wrong decision could have ignited an international conflict. In the end, France agreed to withdraw. Britain further strengthened its dominance in Africa. By the end of the 19th century, gold and diamonds had been discovered in South Africa. Almost overnight, the region became one of the world's most valuable territories. These lands were home to the Boer republics. Britain wanted control over this immense wealth. In 1899, war erupted. Britain launched a massive military campaign to seize control of the region. When the war ended, Britain emerged victorious, but the cost was immense for both the Boer people and Africa. At the beginning of the 20th century, Germany was expanding its African colonies. One of its most important possessions was German Southwest Africa. Land seizures and harsh colonial policies deepened the anger of the Herero and Nama peoples. The conflict that began in 1904 displaced thousands of people. The humanitarian catastrophe is regarded by many historians as one of the cursed genocides of the modern era. By 1914, almost the entire African continent had been divided. Only Ethiopia and Liberia remained independent. By 1914, nearly 90% of Africa was under European colonial rule. Borders changed. Kingdoms disappeared. New colonial administrations emerged. Yet those borders would continue shaping Africa for generations. But colonial rule could not extinguish the will of Africa's people. In the 20th century, independence movements would spread across the continent. The scramble for Africa changed the destiny of an entire continent, but history does not end here. In the next episode, we will witness Africa's long road to independence.